this video, we're going to focus on circular text. To access circular text, we just need to go to the text tool, located up here in the upper left-hand corner. I can click on the text icon and it will take me to the flyout, which I can select this ABC for circled text, or I can go to the floating toolbar here in the upper center, and I can choose the circle text right here as well. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click on it, and it automatically puts a little A next to my cursor, letting me know that I am about to insert text into the design page. And when I left click, it's going to input the circle text. And right off the bat, you notice that it still uses my text as the default, but this time it's different. You can see it's got this little donut here representing the circle text, and it automatically puts the word my text in the upper part of the circle. So if I wanted to adjust this, I can come up to the properties box, and let's just say that I put in here, I'm going to just put the word digitizing and hit apply. And notice that I did put it in where it says upper. That was the default. But notice that there is a lower as well. What that means is I can actually put text down here as well. So you can see that right now this is taking up a lot of space. So if I come in here and I type in masterclass here and hit apply, notice that it's overlapping each other. That's because the text at this size is just too big for the circle size. So there's a couple things we can do. We'll get into editing a little bit, but if I come over here to the height box, and let's just say I put in 0.4 inches and hit apply, let's see what that does. You can see that that makes it fit very nice. And all of this comes down to the size in which you need it, right? So we'll look at how you can manipulate that in a little bit. But that's how you can work with the upper and lower text. You just type in the word you want to be at the top, the word you want to be at the bottom, and it automatically formats it for you. And from here, we can work with all fonts, or we can even filter them like we learned in a previous video, or we can select a different font. So we might want to work with a different lettering in here, and we can do that. We can select whatever one we want and hit apply, and it will put that into this box. And notice that when I do, it does bring it back to the same height. And so I'd have to come in here and adjust that height again to get it to look how we had it before. Just one thing that you kind of have to do when you're working with text. When you change a font, it's going to go back to the default. And so the other things that we can do is you have like a different style for the text, which that'll be in a different video. Spacing, that's the spacing between the letters here. So I could do, let's say, -1 and hit apply. It was at 0. All that's going to do is bring the letters closer together. Or I could even do a positive, like 5, and it will spread them out even more, as you can see. So that makes almost a perfect circle with the text, but let's go back to 0 and hit apply. So these are your basic settings for working with lettering. The height, again, is right here. We adjusted that. The width, I usually keep that the same. Now, there's a lot of times you'll want to adjust, this, and we'll get into that little editing of it. Want to point out the text extra up here at the top. When we go to that, we learned in a previous video that you can change the sequence in which it stitches out, left, right, or center. So right now default's left. That means it'll stitch from left to right and left to right, as we can see right here in the slow redraw. If I change that, it'll change the order in which it will stitch. So I could do, let's just say right, and hit apply, and it'll go from the right to the left. Basic editing for lettering right there. Let's go back to left the default, hit apply. In the previous video, we talked a little bit about trims and lock stitches as well. By default, it's always going to trim between each letter, so it won't jump, it'll trim. And by default, it's going to lock it every time. So it's going to do a tie-in and tie-off lock stitch so that when it does a trim, the thread doesn't unravel. You can change that. You can have it never trim or automatically trim, and that'll be based on how far apart the letters are. And with the lock, you have the similar options. You can have it always lock, never lock, or around a trim. I always suggest doing a lock, regardless if the machine trims or if you manually trim it later. It's just a good idea to have a lock stitch there because you don't want to take the chance of the thread unraveling. Now, if you know that you're just going to jump from letter to letter and you're not going to do a trim manually or with the machine, you can have it set at never, and that would be fine in that situation. So that's your basic working with text. Now let's take a look at it in a project. So I'm going to click on a design over here, and I have this helmet, and this helmet is just a football helmet, and I want to add some text around it. So what I'll do is go to the circle text, click, and it's going to bring up the circle text here. And now all I need to do is put in a name. Let's just say Blue Jay, if I can spell it right. And then the lower, I'm going to put football. And I'm going to hit apply. So you can see that it actually did pretty good. It's not centered. You can see the distance between here and here. I guess it's almost centered, but you can manipulate it a little bit. And the ways that you can do that is right now I'm in edit mode. If I click the selection tool and I click off of it, it's a lot easier for me to reposition the lettering here. Okay, so I can get it to kind of where I want. Now, if I was doing this design, which I kind of am right now, but I would come in and I would select this and I would drag a guideline. There's videos on guidelines that you can watch, but I like to drag guidelines by going to the ruler, dragging it down vertically and horizontally so that I know where the center of this object is that I'm going to put the circular text around. So by doing that, when I click on this word football, you can see that now I can line these up and get them right where they need to be. Just go down just a tad bit here. And you can see that I have that pretty much centered to the design. Now, let's talk a little bit about the editing. You'll notice that when I select it, I'm in regular selection mode. I can right click and go to text edit. So let's just take a look quickly at some of the options you have, because working with circular text is definitely different. So the first thing you want to point out is you have this black dot up here, you have a blue dot right here, and you have this black dot right here. And obviously we have these basic editing in between or for each letter, but I'm focused on this top, this bottom one right here, and this one located right here. And the reason is because that affects these lines and the positioning of the letter inside of this donut in a way. So if I click on this black dot right here and I move up, notice what it's doing. It's making the text proportionately larger. So the words, the letters are getting bigger and they're spreading themselves out at the same time. It keeps everything proportional. So if I wanted this to be a little bit bigger, I could just do that and it makes it much larger. And that looks pretty good. The next thing that you have is this blue icon right here. And notice that the icon, this one is like kind of a plus symbol. This one actually shows like arrows going to the upper center. If I click on it and drag, notice that what it's doing, it's not changing the letters at all as far as the size of the letters. All it's doing is affecting the circle size. Now, the one thing that you want to keep in mind with working with circular text is you can easily start moving it around. So it doesn't have to be centered here. So another reason that you might want to have guidelines, these vertical and horizontal, is so that when you're resizing it this way, you can always get right back into the center here. Okay. It just allows you to know where the center point is, and that makes it a little bit easier. So you can resize it. And then we have this black dot over here. So let's explore what that does. So if I click it and drag it, notice that all it's doing is affecting the distance between letters. It's not necessarily the distance, it's like kind of squeezing it. So the width of each letter is changing at the same time as it's getting closer together or further apart. So it's just something to keep in mind with that, is it keeps the overall circle here the same, doesn't affect it at all. It only affects the letters inside, stretching them or compacting them. So that's how those basic editing tools work. So the other things that you can do for editing that I use quite a bit are the blue diamonds. I don't typically mess with these orange dots because what that does is allows you to move a letter entirely. I don't want to really move a letter off of the line, but I like to work with the spacing between letters. And the thing that makes editing the circular text different is when I slide, it does the whole row in or out, and so it keeps everything pretty centered here, and it's bringing in both sides or stretching them out, and so everything kind of keeps the same horizontal path here. So you don't have to worry about that when you're working with adjusting. Oh, and I just moved the whole thing. And so you can just play around with it and get it how you want, whatever looks best for you. It's really easy. Like, for instance, this Y and the A, I would definitely put that closer together. It looks funny that far apart. And the word football, these letter L's look like there's more distance between them than the other letters, so I could bring those in a little bit, and I think it would look a little bit better that way. Those are your basic editing features for working with circular text. So it's very easy to work with it, but you have to be willing to play with it for a while. The one thing that you always need to keep in mind whenever you're doing anything in the software, I'm going to go back to the text edit mode here, but if you make a change to something and you don't like it, hit the undo button and it will take it right back. So you always have that ability to go back to a previous spot. So don't be scared to play. You're not going to break anything. Okay. You always can go to undo. And circular text is a great tool, great editing features you have for it. So if you're needing to put text in a circular form, you want to definitely use the circle text tool.